You have tried to change your life before, more than once. You have set goals, restructured your habits, ended relationships that were draining you, started new routines with genuine conviction, and for a while, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe even a few months, things seemed to shift. The air felt different. Possibility crept back in. You thought this time it is actually working. And then, with a slowness so subtle you almost could not pinpoint when it began, everything drifted back. Not to the exact same place, perhaps, but to the same flavor, the same emotional temperature, the same quiet sense that no matter how many rooms you rearrange in your life, you are still somehow living in the same house. And you have blamed yourself for this. You have called it a lack of discipline, a lack of willpower, a flaw in your character that makes you incapable of sustaining change. But here is what no one has ever explained to you, and it is the reason every attempt at transformation has eventually collapsed back into the familiar. You have been trying to change the wrong layer. You have been redecorating the surface of a structure whose foundations were never touched. And the foundations, the ones you cannot see, the ones you have never been taught to look for, are the only layers that actually determine what your life becomes. Reality is not one thing. It is not a flat, solid wall that you push against with effort until it eventually moves. Reality is layered. It is built in concentric rings, one inside the other, each one deeper, each one more invisible, and each one exponentially more powerful than the one above it. There are 5 of these layers. Most people spend their entire lives operating on the first one, never realizing there are 4 more beneath it, silently running everything. And the reason your life keeps returning to the same patterns, the same financial ceilings, the same relational dynamics, the same emotional weather, is that the deeper layers have not changed. They cannot be reached by the tools you have been using. They require a different kind of attention entirely. Let us walk through them, one by one, from the surface to the core. And by the time we reach the 5th, you will understand not only why you have been stuck, but exactly where the lock is and how to turn the key. The first layer, circumstance. This is where almost everyone lives. This is the layer you can see, touch, measure, and point to. It is your bank account balance. It is your job title. It is the person sleeping next to you or the empty space where someone used to be. It is the number on the scale, the city you live in, the car you drive, the debt you carry. It is the visible architecture of your daily life. And it is the layer that receives approximately 99% of your attention and 100% of your effort when you decide something needs to change. When people say they want to change their life, they almost always mean they want to change their circumstances. They want more money, a different relationship, a healthier body, a new career. And the approach they take is direct and logical. They attack the circumstance itself. They send out resumes. They start a diet. They open a savings account. They download an app. They take action aimed squarely at the visible problem, and they expect the visible problem to yield. Sometimes it does, temporarily. You can force a circumstance to shift through sheer effort the way you can push a boulder up a hill through brute strength. But the moment you stop pushing, the moment your discipline wavers or your energy dips or life throws something unexpected at you, the boulder rolls back. Not because you are weak, but because you were fighting gravity the entire time. The circumstance was never the cause of your situation. It was the symptom. And treating a symptom while ignoring the disease does not produce healing. It produces an exhausting cycle of temporary relief followed by inevitable relapse. Think of it this way. Imagine you walk into a room and the air is thick with smoke. Your eyes burn. Your lungs ache. The rational response seems obvious. Get rid of the smoke. So you open windows. You turn on fans. You wave your arms furiously to clear the air. And for a moment the smoke thins, but it keeps coming back, because somewhere in the room there is a fire you have not found. The smoke is not the problem. The smoke is the evidence. and no amount of fanning will make a difference until you locate the flame. Your circumstances are the smoke. Everything you see in your external life, every condition you are trying to change through direct action alone, is the visible output of invisible causes operating in the layers beneath. And until you go deeper, the smoke will keep coming back, and you will keep exhausting yourself trying to clear air that is being constantly replenished by a source you have never addressed. The second layer, thought. Beneath the visible world of circumstance lies the layer that generates it. This is the layer of thought. Your habitual, repetitive, largely unconscious mental patterns, the ones running through your mind from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, and often continuing while you dream. Most people do not realize how repetitive their thinking actually is. Studies in cognitive science have suggested that the average person thinks somewhere between 60 and 70,000 thoughts per day, and the overwhelming majority of those thoughts are the same ones they thought yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. Your mind is not generating fresh, creative, original thought for most of the day. It is replaying. It is running a loop. And that loop is not neutral. It is a set of instructions being delivered to every system in your body and broadcast into the field of your experience. When you think the same thoughts repeatedly, those thoughts create familiar neural pathways that become your default mode of processing reality. You do not see the world as it is. You see the world through the filter of your most practiced thoughts. The person who habitually thinks about scarcity does not merely worry about money. They literally perceive the world as a place of scarcity. They see threats where others see opportunities. They interpret ambiguous situations as dangerous. They experience generosity from others with suspicion rather than gratitude, because their thought filter has been calibrated to detect lack, and it is exceptionally good at its job. This is why two people can stand in the same city, on the same street, in the same economy, and experience entirely different realities. One sees a world full of openings. The other sees a world closing in. Neither is hallucinating. Both are perceiving accurately, given the filter they are looking through. But neither is seeing objective reality. They are seeing reality as it appears through the lens of their habitual thought. Now, here is the important part. And it is the reason that working on this layer alone, while better than only addressing circumstances, is still not enough. Your thoughts are not the deepest layer. They feel like they are. They feel like the origin point because they are the first invisible thing you encounter when you turn your attention inward. But thoughts do not arise from nowhere. They are generated by something deeper. Something that selects which thoughts are available to you in the first place, and which ones your mind keeps returning to no matter how many times you try to redirect it. If you have ever tried to simply think differently, to replace a negative thought with a positive one through sheer repetition, you know how frustrating it can be. The old thought keeps returning. It keeps reasserting itself, not because you lack discipline, but because the thought is being produced by a layer beneath it that you have not yet addressed. Which brings us to the third layer. The third layer, emotion. Beneath your thoughts, generating them, coloring them, giving them their charge and their stickiness, is the layer of emotion. And this is where most people's understanding of their inner world begins to get thin, because emotions are slippery. They are harder to observe than thoughts. They do not arrive with neat verbal labels. They live in the body more than the mind. And a culture that prizes rationality has given most people almost no tools for navigating this territory. Your emotional state is not a reaction to your thoughts. This is the common misunderstanding. Most people believe the sequence goes like this. Something happens, you think about it, and then you feel something in response. But this is backwards. Your emotional state is the soil from which your thoughts grow. When you wake up in a state of anxiety, you do not need a reason to start worrying. The worry generates itself. Your mind begins scanning your life for threats, for problems, for things that could go wrong. Not because those things demanded your attention, but because your emotional state sent your mind on a search mission for content that matches the feeling already present in your body. This is why you can have a perfectly fine day, with nothing objectively wrong, and still feel a low, heavy current of unease running beneath every interaction. The unease was not caused by the day. The unease was already there when the day started, and it colored everything that happened afterward. Your mind simply found things to attach the feeling to. It gave the emotion a story, but the story was not the cause. The emotion was the cause. The story was the justification your mind invented so the feeling would make sense. Your emotional body is broadcasting a frequency at all times. This frequency is not metaphorical. Anyone who has walked into a room and immediately sensed tension, or met a person and felt inexplicably at ease before a single word was exchanged, has directly experienced the reality of emotional frequency. You are transmitting this frequency constantly, and it is shaping your experience far more directly than your thoughts alone ever could. Because the universe, the field of reality you move through, does not respond to your words. It does not respond to your plans or your affirmations, or your carefully constructed intentions. It responds to the frequency you are actually emitting. And the frequency you are actually emitting is determined not by what you are thinking, but by what you are feeling at the deepest, most unguarded level of your being. This is why someone can recite positive affirmations every morning and still attract the same painful patterns. The words are positive. The underlying emotional state is one of fear, desperation, or unworthiness. And the emotional state is the actual signal. It is the transmission the universe reads. The affirmation is like writing a cheerful message on the outside of an envelope that contains a letter full of grief. The recipient opens the envelope. They do not read the outside. Working on the emotional layer means learning to feel what you have been avoiding. It means developing the willingness to sit with discomfort, to let stored emotions surface and move through you without immediately numbing, distracting, or explaining them away. This is uncomfortable work. It is the work most people skip entirely in favor of more thinking, more planning, more strategy. But no strategy built on top of unprocessed fear will produce anything other than more elaborate expressions of that fear. You must go through the emotion, not around it. And yet, even this layer, as deep as it feels, is not the deepest. Because your emotions, like your thoughts, do not arise from nothing. They are being generated by something even more fundamental. The fourth layer, identity. This is the layer where things become genuinely uncomfortable. Because this is the layer where you encounter not what you think or what you feel, but who you believe yourself to be. And this distinction changes everything. Your identity, your self-image, is the collection of beliefs you hold about the kind of person you are, not the person you present to the world. Not the version of yourself that you perform in social settings or professional environments. The private, unspoken, deeply held conclusion you have reached about your own nature. It includes what you believe you are capable of, what you believe you deserve, what you believe is available to someone like you, and what you believe you will inevitably experience regardless of what you try. This layer is the thermostat. If the first layer, circumstance, is the temperature in the room, this fourth layer is the setting on the dial. And you can open every window in the house, you can bring in industrial fans. You can take dramatic action to force the temperature in a new direction. But as long as the thermostat remains set where it is, the system will eventually pull the temperature back to match. A person whose identity includes the belief, "I am someone who always struggles financially," will find ways to recreate financial struggle even after receiving a windfall. A person whose identity includes, "I am not the kind of person who has deeply fulfilling relationships," will unconsciously sabotage or exit relationships that begin to feel genuinely nourishing. Not because they want to suffer, not because they are masochistic or foolish, but because the subconscious mind is devoted, with absolute loyalty, to maintaining consistency between your lived experience and your self-image. It treats the self-image as a blueprint and works tirelessly to build a life that matches. When external conditions deviate from the blueprint, the subconscious perceives a threat and mobilizes every resource it has to correct the deviation and restore the familiar pattern. Maxwell Maltz, the plastic surgeon who discovered this mechanism through decades of practice, observed it with clinical precision. He would perform technically perfect surgery on a patient's face, and some patients would transform their entire lives in response, while others would look in the mirror at their genuinely changed reflection and see no difference at all. The face was different, the self-image was not, and the self-image won. It always wins. Your identity was not chosen by you. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this layer. You did not sit down one day and deliberately select the beliefs you would hold about yourself for the rest of your life. Your identity was assembled by a child, a very young child, interpreting the reactions of caregivers, the tone of voice used to speak to them, the experiences of early failure and success, the offhand comments of teachers and relatives, the emotional atmosphere of their household. That child could not distinguish between what was happening around them and what was true about them. A parent who was emotionally unavailable did not register as, "My parent is struggling with their own pain." It registered as, "I am not important enough to be attended to." A moment of public embarrassment did not register as, "That was an unfortunate event." It registered as, "I am the kind of person that happens to." These interpretations hardened into identity, and that identity has been running the show ever since, not from the front of your mind where you could examine it, but from the basement of your psyche where it operates with the quiet authority of something that has never been questioned. Changing this layer requires a specific practice. It requires not just new thoughts or new emotions, but a new experience of yourself, rehearsed and inhabited so consistently that the subconscious begins to accept it as the updated blueprint. Maltz called it the theater of the mind. Neville Goddard described it as occupying the state of the wish fulfilled. The language differs. The mechanism is the same. You must imagine yourself as the person you intend to become with enough vividness, enough sensory detail, and enough emotional authenticity that your nervous system cannot distinguish the imagined experience from a lived one. And you must do this not once in a burst of inspiration, but daily, with the same patient consistency you would bring to learning any new skill. This is where most people who have heard of self-image work stop. They assume identity is the deepest layer. They believe that if they can change who they think they are, everything else will follow. And they are almost right. But there is one more layer, and it is the one that holds all the others in place. The fifth layer, assumption. This is the floor beneath the floor, the bedrock. The layer so deep that almost no one reaches it, not because it is hidden, but because it does not feel like a layer at all. It feels like reality itself. And that is precisely what makes it the most powerful and the most dangerous of all five. Your assumptions are not beliefs about yourself. They are beliefs about the nature of reality. They are the rules you believe the game is being played by. They are the conclusions you have drawn about how the world works, what is possible within it, and what the fundamental relationship is between you and the universe you inhabit. Identity says, "I am not enough." Assumption says, "The world does not give people like me what they want." Identity says, "I am not lovable." Assumption says, "Love always comes with conditions and eventually leaves." Identity is a belief about the self. Assumption is a belief about the fabric of existence. And assumption is deeper because it creates the context within which identity is formed. Your identity could not have crystallized the way it did without a set of assumptions about reality, providing the framework. Consider this carefully. A person could do extensive self-image work, could genuinely shift their identity to believe they are worthy of abundance, and still remain stuck if their underlying assumption is that the universe is fundamentally scarce. They now believe they deserve wealth, but they also believe there is not enough to go around. The new identity sits on top of the old assumption, and the assumption undermines it silently, the way a crack in a foundation undermines even the most beautifully renovated room above it. The assumptions you carry about reality are the most invisible of all the layers, because they do not present themselves as beliefs. They present themselves as facts. They feel as self-evident as gravity. Life is a struggle. You have to work hard to get anywhere. Good things do not last. There is always a catch. People cannot be trusted. These statements do not feel like opinions to the person holding them. They feel like observations. Objective. Verified by years of experience. Beyond question. But they are not observations. They are filters. And the reason they feel so thoroughly confirmed by your experience is that they were selecting your experience all along. An assumption is not a passive belief sitting in the corner of your mind. It is an active instruction, organizing your perception, directing your attention, attracting circumstances that match it, and repelling circumstances that contradict it, with a consistency that feels like proof but is actually production. You are not discovering that life is hard. You are generating a hard life through the assumption that it must be. The evidence you point to as justification for the assumption was created by the assumption itself. It is a closed loop, and it will remain closed until you see it for what it is and make the radical decision to step outside of it. Neville Goddard understood this layer with extraordinary clarity. He did not merely teach people to change their thoughts or their feelings or even their identity. He taught them to change their fundamental assumptions about what reality is and how it responds to consciousness. He said that your assumptions, though false, if sustained, will harden into fact. This is not a hopeful platitude. It is a precise description of the mechanism operating at this fifth layer. Whatever you assume to be true about the nature of your reality becomes true for you, not because the universe changed, but because your assumption organized your perception and your experience into a flawless confirmation of itself. Working on this layer requires something that feels almost absurd when you first attempt it. It requires you to question things you have never thought to question. Not your goals, not your plans, not your self-concept, the rules, the very rules you believe reality operates by. It requires you to sit with the possibility that life is hard is not a fact, but a choice. That there is never enough is not an observation, but a creative act. That people always leave is not a pattern you discovered, but a pattern you are authoring day after day through the quiet, invisible power of an assumption you mistook for truth. And it requires you to do something that every fiber of your conditioned mind will resist. It requires you to assume something different, not to hope for it, not to wish for it, not to affirm it while secretly doubting it, to assume it, to take it on as the baseline operating premise of your life, to walk through your day as though reality is generous, responsive, and fundamentally on your side, not because you have evidence, but because you understand that the evidence always comes after the assumption, never before it. You do not get proof, and then believe. You believe, and then the proof assembles itself around you. This is the hardest thing you will ever do, not because it requires effort. It requires almost no effort. It requires something far more difficult than effort. It requires the willingness to let go of the story you've been telling about the world for as long as you can remember. It requires you to release the identity of someone who has figured out how the world really works and step into the vulnerability of someone who is willing to be wrong about everything they thought they knew. And that vulnerability, that openness, that willingness to stand in the unknown without the armor of your old assumptions is the doorway to a completely different experience of being alive. Now, here is what most people never understand about these 5 layers. They are not separate systems. They are one system. They are nested inside each other like concentric rings, each layer generating the one above it. Your assumptions produce your identity. Your identity produces your emotions. Your emotions produce your thoughts. Your thoughts produce your circumstances. And your circumstances, the only layer most people ever try to change, are the final output of a chain that began 4 levels deeper. This is why changing circumstances alone never works permanently. You are trimming the branches of a tree whose roots remain exactly as they were, and the roots will always grow new branches. This is why changing thoughts alone produces limited results. The thoughts keep regenerating because the emotional soil they grow in has not changed. This is why emotional healing alone, while profoundly valuable, sometimes fails to produce the external shifts people hope for. The emotions were cleared, but the identity beneath them still carries the old blueprint. And this is why even identity work, powerful as it is, sometimes hits a ceiling. The self-image shifted, but the assumption about reality remained, quietly reconstructing the old limits within a slightly different frame. True transformation, the kind that does not snap back, the kind that rearranges your life so thoroughly that people who knew you before barely recognize the person standing in front of them, requires that you reach the deepest layer and change it. Not all at once, not with force, with awareness, with the patient willingness to look beneath each level and ask, what is under this? What is generating this pattern? What do I believe not about myself, but about the world that is making this pattern feel inevitable? And when you reach the bottom, when you arrive at that fifth layer and see the assumptions for what they are, something extraordinary happens. You realize that you were never trapped by reality. You were trapped by your description of it. The walls were never solid. They were projections, cast by a light you did not know you were holding onto a screen you had mistaken for the world. The prison was made entirely of conclusions, and conclusions, unlike concrete, can be revised. You have been the projectionist this entire time, standing in a dark room, illuminating the same images on the wall for years, and then walking around to the front to live inside the picture you yourself were casting. The images felt so real, so immovable, so obviously just the way things are, that it never occurred to you to turn around, to look at the projector, to examine the film loaded inside it, to realize that you could remove the old reel, replace it with a new one, and watch in astonishment as the images on the wall rearrange themselves to match. You do not need to fight reality. You need to change what you are projecting onto it. And that change begins not at the surface where the images appear, but at the source, at the deepest layer, at the assumption you have mistaken for the world. Go there, look, and choose again.